we request that both spouses come and sit down and be part of all of our financial conversations, just for this reason here. So if something were to happen to one, we want to make sure that the remaining spouse continues to feel comfortable and confident in leading their financial situation and financial picture.
Welcome to the Your Life, Your Money podcast with Scott Sierens, teaching you how to thrive in life, wealth, and retirement.
Welcome to another episode of the Your Life, Your Money podcast, where we discuss thoughts, strategies, and actions to help you thrive in life, wealth, and retirement. I'm your host, Scott Sierens, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about more listener questions. You might find yourself in a similar scenario, or maybe it's thoughts, strategies that you can implement based upon what you're hearing and questions that others have that you can implement in your scenario. If you haven't yet, subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast player. And if you're looking for any of the show notes, resources, or just other resources in regards to building wealth, check us out at lifemoneyshow.com. Again, that's lifemoneyshow.com. Now, before we get into today's questions, I've found quite a nice article here on CNBC.com that I wanted to share with you. And the title of the article is, "These Retirees Are More Likely to Be Comfortable or Affluent, According to a Study." And in the article here, there's a study by the Employee Benefit Research Institute, and it's measuring how people feel in retirement. Now, the measurements or the feedback that people would get would be either that they are struggling, just getting by, average, comfortable, or affluent. And those that were average, comfortable, and affluent had three similarities. Those three similarities were they had guaranteed income, little debt, and a very clear spend down strategy of how they were going to spend their money in their retirement or in as they approached or became financially independent. Those three things led to the, we'll call it, most satisfied people in retirement. Now, let's just kind of think about this a little bit, right? So the reason I like this article is I preach these things all the time, but now you're kind of seeing a little bit of a study here in regards to it. And I'll just say, whether it be life or business, right, that fastest road, that fastest path to success is to learn, study, and replicate those that are successful in the area that you want to be in. So if you're looking or targeting to feel comfortable or affluent in your retirement, these are 3 points that you really want to think about. Number one, having guaranteed income. And in my experience, those that have, grown and maximized their Social Security to the most of their benefit, that have a pension coming in or might have some rental income coming in. My experience, I find this to hold true, right? Those people feel more comfortable in retirement. The second point, having little debt. Now, I know that there's a lot of different ways to look at your mortgage, meaning interest rates are very low, and if you're to keep your money in the market, then would that money make more in the market versus having your home paid off? Again, in my experience working with a lot of people age 55 plus, I find those that are most comfortable are those that have little to no debt. And primarily, I find a lot of clients that have no debt going into retirement, and that just makes them feel comfortable. So there's always a logical and emotional side to everything. While the logical might say, oh, it's okay to have this small interest rate here, or on the mortgage, the emotional side for these folks is that, hey, it's all paid off, and it just makes them feel comfortable that they don't have payments towards a home as they go into retirement. The other thing is just having any other sort of debts paid off, not carrying credit card balances, not having or carrying huge car loans, right? So as you go into this new phase of life where you're no longer going to have this company paycheck coming in anymore, right? So as you go into where that new phase of life where that company paycheck shuts off, you're now using all of what you've saved up as your new company. And you've got to start creating or cutting what I like to call as your own personal paychecks. And going into retirement with little debt or knowing that the only personal paychecks that you are going to cut are for your personal lifestyle and not for any sort of debts, I found that helps people feel comfortable as they transition into that next stage. And then the last is just having what they said is a clear spend down strategy. And if you've listened to any of the shows before, you'll know I talk a lot of times about having an income plan in place, meaning how much needs to go out in regards to your lifestyle, how much needs to go out in regards to health, how much that needs to go out in regards to travel, in regards to all of the different things that you want to do. And as you put all of that together and forecast that out for the rest of your life, and then put that forecast and align that forecast with your investments, I find that that helps give people confidence. It helps gives them almost like this license to spend as they go into that next phase of life. So having that clear spend down strategy in place, again, helps you feel more comfortable as you go into those next stages of life. So just thought it was a great article. We'll link to it in the show notes today. So that way you can go read the article for yourself and see how others that feel average, comfortable, and affluent in retirement, what 3 commonalities that they have in place. So, all right, with that, let's move on to some listener questions that we've received, and I thought it would be a good idea to take these and chat about them. So the first question we have here is from George. George says, I've heard you talking about being aware of the risk in your portfolio. I'm 65. Exactly how much risk should I be taking? I'll tell you what, George, you are not the only person wondering about this. A lot of people wonder about how much risk and reward or risk and return, what that balance is that they should have in their portfolio. And I find that there's a lot of, I'm going to call it maybe misleading tools, thoughts, and ideas out there. One is just these basic risk tolerance questionnaires that in the end they're going to tell you, well, you should be conservative, or you should be moderate, and or you should be aggressive. And then you look at those responses and you go, well, that's great, but what does that mean? How should my portfolio be constructed? Then there's the rule of 100, right, which is 100 minus your age, and then that's how much you should have at growth in your portfolio. And then I find that some people now are starting to modify that. So it's like the rule of 110, so 110 minus your age, and that's how much you should have at growth. But then I find using that, so let's just give you an example using the rule of 110. Let's say 110 minus your age, George, of 65. That would say 45% of your portfolio should be at growth. The rest should be at safety. In my opinion, my personal opinion, that could be a little bit too conservative, dependent on how long you need this money to last, depending on how much you need to produce of income from this portfolio. And so I feel like sometimes those basic guides that are out there aren't necessarily the right tool to use. And here's what it comes down. Let's just kind of think about it when it comes down to risk, right? Compare it to life, right? If everything's going good in life, we feel good about things. We feel confident about things. If there's days in life that aren't just going so well, right, we feel down or bad. Folks, the same holds true when it comes to the market, right? When the market's doing good, what do? You feel really good. And when the market's down, well, we're upset. We feel bad because the market's down. And I find that these risk tolerance questionnaires sometimes are just measuring you how you feel at that time. So here's my take. My take is that it depends on your income plan. There's still an emotional and a logical side to things, but it depends on your income plan. So think about this. If you put together your income plan, George, and you feel over the next, let's say 5 years, right, that you need to withdraw $50,000 a year to maintain your lifestyle and retirement. Well, let's think back to some different market corrections. There's 01, 02, and then how about 08, 09, right? So let's think about 08, 09. In 09, the market starts coming back. 2010, 11, 12, 13, right? That's when the market's starting to get back to even, right? Back to where the point was that I'll say the peak of it when it crashed, right? It's starting to get back up to that point. So basically it took 5 years for the market about 5 years for the market to recover. So you could look at it from this standpoint, and this is my take on things, is let's make sure that in the event that the market crashes again, let's make sure that we've got 5 years of supplemental income on the safer side of your portfolio, what I've liked to nickname is the war chest. And then you've got the remainder of your funds on the growth side of your portfolio. Now, if you feel like you're a more aggressive investor, or you don't feel like the market's going to take 5 years to recover in the future, well, then maybe you only have 3 years in your war chest. If you feel like, well, I don't know, I think this next time could, be really, really bad, well, then maybe you put more than 5 years over in your war chest. So that's where the emotional side comes in. Maybe you're a little bit more aggressive than that. Maybe you want to be a little bit more safer than that. But let's take more of that logical approach. So let's just give an example here. Let's say George has $1 million in his portfolio, and he puts together his income plan, and he sees over the next 5 years he's going to need to withdraw $50,000 a year. Well, 50,000 times 5, I would suggest then we carve off $250,000 into George's war chest, the safer side of his portfolio. Again, so it's there. We know it's there in the event that the market were to correct. And then he's got the remainder, $750,000, over on the growth side of the portfolio. Now, I know I'm just giving some pretty vague terms, right? Safer side and growth side, that's when you want to go in then and have a very diversified portfolio. But hopefully that helps you understand the breakdown. Hopefully that then helps you take a look at the numbers and go, okay, this may logically make sense, but then are you emotionally okay with those numbers? Or do you look at it and go, 50 doesn't sound like enough on the safer side for me. I want 350. And that's fine. Also, be aware, though, you get too much on the safer side, depending on how much you need to withdraw and how long you need your money to last, you could become too conservative. So hopefully that helps you break down, right, how much risk you should be taking in your portfolio, and then how much you should have on that, or I should say how much safety you would need in your portfolio, and then how much you would want on that growth side, again, to keep up with inflation and to further supplement your income in future years. Okay, our next question here is from Robert. Robert says, which is better? Should I max out the Roth 401k or the Roth IRA? I'm in my mid-30s and already getting the Roth 401k match from my employer and then adding an additional 5% on that in the Roth 401k. Should I put the remainder of my retirement savings into a Roth IRA or more towards the Roth 401k? I probably can't max out both, so should I do one more than the other or in a little bit of each? Does it even make a difference? Robert, thanks for sending this question in, and I think for those listening that, got a little tongue twisted there, but I think let's just make one thing very clear of what Robert was asking. Both options that Robert was giving here were Roths. One was the Roth 401k, one was the Roth IRA. Now, how does the Roth work? The Roth means that basically you pay tax today on your money. You put it into the Roth, and it doesn't matter 401k or IRA, they both work the same, right? You put the money into the Roth. The money then, if you invest it, right, grows tax-free, and every dollar that you put in plus every dollar of growth can be taken out tax-free in your future. So, back to Robert's question, which one's better, Roth 401k, Roth IRA? Well, I mean, from a very high-level standpoint, as I just mentioned, they work both the same. You're getting the same tax benefits from both accounts. So from a tax benefit standpoint, it doesn't make a difference. But let's talk about some other factors that you might want to think about as far as where you're putting your funds and your money. First off, as Robert mentioned, you want to make sure that you're getting your company match. So Robert had mentioned, he is putting enough in to get his company match. For those of you out there thinking, hey, what should I do? Make sure you're always getting your company match. Sometimes your company will match up to 3%, sometimes up to 4 or 5. All companies have different, I'll call it matching rules, You want to understand what that rule is, and then you want to make sure that you're at least putting that much in, so you're getting kind of that, I guess what we like to call is that free money, that money from your company that goes into your account. Now remember, your company also probably has a vesting period, meaning that you've got to stay around a certain amount of time before their money that they've put in becomes 100% yours. So make sure you understand that vesting period as well. Okay, back to Robert's question. So first off, getting the company match. After that, like we talked about, from a tax standpoint, both accounts work the same. So I guess if you really want to get into the detail and get into the weeds of things here, a couple things. One, how much more are you putting in? Because the Roth IRA right now, let's see, we're 2021, so based on current rules, at your age, Robert, you can put in $6,000 a year. If you feel like you can contribute over that amount, well, then maybe you want to focus on your Roth 401k, because at your age, Robert, in your mid-30s there, you're able to put in the $19,500 a year. Now, for those that might be age 50 plus, there's always the catch-up contributions. If you're age 50 plus, the Roth IRA, you can put in $7,000 per year. The Roth 401k up to $26,000 per year. The Roth 401k does not have any sort of income limits to it, meaning you can put up to that $26,000 a year no matter how much you make. The Roth IRA, though, have income limits, so if you make too much, you may no longer be able to actually contribute to your Roth IRA, so you got to look at the income limits. Another part here then is, and again, kind of getting into the detail and the weeds of things, is just looking at the overall cost of the investments in the accounts. So you want to compare the investment options that you have available to you in your Roth IRA, and what are the expense ratios of those different funds, what's the expenses of that account, and then how about in your Roth 401k, what's the expense ratio in those funds and of that overall account. And so if all's equal, right, you said, I can only put $2,000 more away, I would kind of then go towards the account where your overall expenses are lower. But I mean, Robert, great job of saving. Keep up the great work on saving. Keep up the great work about thinking about money and accounts, Roths, IRAs, 401ks. As you're in your mid-30s here, you're on your way to some great success. So keep up the good work and keep up the good thought processes. Next question here, we've got Grace. Grace says, my dad just died 6 months ago, and I'm a little worried about my mom, who's in her late 70s and is now in charge of handling the investments for the first time in her life. I don't know much about it myself, so what should I tell her to do? Well, Grace, I think, first is just to have a conversation with your mom. I'm very sorry here to hear that your father has passed away. But I think, it's just to sit down to have a conversation with your mom. Sounds, and I think that first question is does she feel comfortable managing the investments? Now, I'm just going to make an assumption here from what you wrote, since your father managed them the whole time, that she may not. And if she doesn't, then I would recommend, Grace, that the two of you sit down with a financial advisor, somebody to get help and support from. I would recommend finding yourself a fiduciary, somebody legally obligated to act in your best interest. And then also looking for a financial advisor that takes a comprehensive approach, meaning that they're not only just helping you in regards to investment management, but are also going to help your mother when it comes to income planning, meaning taking withdrawals from these accounts so that way she can continue to live her lifestyle, tax strategies and tax planning, keeping more of that hard-earned money in your mother's pocket versus giving it to the IRS, and then health planning as well as estate planning and risk management. So doing whatever's possible to help put your mother in the best position possible. Now, for those of you that are listening and think, hopefully Grace's question here has maybe sparked some thoughts about your own scenario. So if you're listening to this today and you are married, are you both involved in your finances? Would you be confident if one person were to pass away? Would the other person be confident. Let me just kind of give you a sports analogy here. Think about this. Think about on a football team, right? You've got your quarterback, but there's a backup quarterback. And same, right, as far as couples, right? Maybe there's somebody that always has that, is primarily handling the finances. That's kind of what they're doing in the relationship. That's where they feel comfortable. Back to the sports analogy here. So we've got a quarterback, but we have a backup quarterback. That backup quarterback's at all of the practices, runs all of the same plays, knows the playbook. And that's my point here. In the event that something were to happen to the primary spouse, right? Just like that backup quarterback could come in, be comfortable, confident, maybe not the same as the starting quarterback, right? Maybe not the same approach, maybe not the same abilities, but that person's able to come in, take control, understands what's going on, and continue to lead the game. And so same thing in your relationship with the spouse, even though maybe in your relationship there's one spouse that primarily handles the finances, would that other spouse be able to, if something happened, would that other spouse be able to come in, be comfortable and confident, and be able to continue to lead? And I find a lot of times, we request that both spouses come and sit down and be part of all of our financial conversations, just for this reason here. So if something were to happen to one, we want to make sure that the remaining spouse continues to feel comfortable and confident in leading their financial situation and financial picture. So I hope this not only helped Grace, but I hope this helped everyone out there, those that are in relationships, really think about their relationship, and if something were to happen, right, with that spouse that's maybe not the one that primarily takes care of the finances, would they be able to take over, or do you have that financial advisor that they've already been working with, feel comfortable and confident with, to carry on their life in a time especially where they're going to need that support the most? One more question here. We've got David. David says, my father died in his late 60s and my mother died in her early 70s. So I'm not planning to have much longevity myself. Does that mean I should start taking Social Security as early as I can? Before we get really into, answering David's question, I want to make sure that we all have a full understanding when it comes to Social Security. Social Security, full retirement age, that's when you can collect your full retirement Social Security benefit. You might go online, you might get that statement in the mail, and it says your primary insurance amount, or it's going to say, here's the amount that you get at full retirement age. And what is full retirement age? Well, it's different for everyone. It's all based on the year that you were born. I'll just say, that's where you want to go and look at SSA.gov or look at your Social Security statement. It'll tell you what that is. Now, if you're to take Social Security early, and you can take it any day, month that you want, as early as age 62, if you're to take it early, you're going to get a reduced amount from what it says that full retirement age amount is. So just be aware, you're going to get a reduced amount. So back to David's question. He's saying, hey, there's not a whole lot of longevity in my family. Should I think about taking Social Security early? Well, David, I think there's a few different parts. The first part, just like you said, you could look at longevity. And you could do a calculation that says, okay, here's how long I plan to live. And then you can look at all the different ages and years that you can take Social Security and try to max it out based on longevity. But to me, that's only one part, and that could really, short side your future finances. And here's why, and here's the other parts that you need to think about. Part number 2, how much have you saved up? You see, I find that a lot of people look at Social Security and they're just looking at it from a standpoint of longevity. But the other part you really need to look at is how much have you saved up? How big of a retirement portfolio, retirement savings bucket have you saved up? And you see, if you haven't saved enough up, and based on the lifestyle that you need to live, if you take Social Security too early, you could potentially run that bucket out. But you might also have this retirement savings bucket that's a great big bucket. You look at it, you go, based on the lifestyle I need to live, I'm never going to run out of that bucket of money. Well, then maybe you want to take Social Security early, use it, reinvest it, however you might so choose. So again, I think it's beyond just the longevity. You have to look at how much you have saved. You have to then use your income plan to see how much Social Security you'll need to have coming in to make your income plan work and to make your retirement savings last. The third part you need to think about is, do you still plan to work in your mid-60s or into your upper 60s or till you're 70? Because you see, if you still plan to work, you could actually be hurting how much Social Security you're able to gather. Here's what I mean. If you take Social Security prior to full retirement age, so let's just say, for example, you're taking it at 63, and you're still working. If you make over a certain threshold amount from your employment income, then they start to deduct how much Social Security you are actually able to collect. So that's another part. We're not going to get into the full detail and all the rules here today, but that's another part that you want to think about, is if you plan to work. So to recap David's question here, should I take Social Security early? There's not a lot of longevity in my family. To recap, I think there's three parts that you need to think about. Yes, one, you could do a calculation on longevity, but you need to add in parts 2 and 3. Part 2 being, how much do you have saved, and when should you take Social Security based upon how much you have saved and how to make that money last. And then the third part is, do you still plan to work or not? So David, I hope that gave you some good processes to walk through, to think about in regards to your question, as well as others that are thinking about, do I take Social Security early or do I wait till later in life? Well, I hope you really found today's show to be of value and benefit. I hope those questions and our responses really helped you think about your own situation. Maybe it gave you some thoughts, strategies that you can implement in your own life. If you have any questions, go to lifemoneyshow.com. Again, that's lifemoneyshow.com. There's an area on there where you can submit your questions. We'd be happy to go over them and answer them in the podcast. Plus, if you're looking for any sort of resources regarding retirement, regarding building wealth, go to lifemoneyshow.com. We've got podcasts, blog posts, videos to help you in your financial future. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast player, and I look forward to our next conversation to continue to help you live life today and be financially confident about your tomorrow.
Sierens Financial Group is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Sierens Financial Group, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Sierens Financial Group, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein, provided by third parties, have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Sierens Financial Group, Inc.